So hello everyone. So in this video, we are going to see about how to create the views that are necessary in order to interact with the users in a Spring MVC with the help of JSP. So JSP stands for nothing but a Java Server Pages. Okay, so which is basically used to create a dynamic or server-side web pages. So this JSP files are particularly HTML files with embedded or which help us to work with that of the Java code. Okay. Then, in order to annotate that a particular file is a is of type in JSP, okay. So we have to give this annotation in each and every JSP file, okay, which is nothing but a JSP container in which tells that it has Java code embedded in it and it belongs to a is of type JSP, okay. Then inside this JSP, as we saw in the Spring MVC, right? If we want to map any controller value with that of the view value, so we have to give annotation of the special expression languages, which are of type this, as we can see in the example. Okay, so this expression language helps us to map the values that we are setting in the controller with that of the view. Okay, so it basically simplifies the accessibility of Java objects or different methods that we are creating in the Java class to that of the JSP pages. So this example, as we can see, is dollar. So how do we create this JS expression? Is nothing but first we give the dollar symbol, and in the curly braces we include whatever the fields or the value that we are trying to access. Okay, so we will understand about this in the coding part in more detail. Okay, so if I simply say about this here further in the example, I'll explain. Okay, then this JS, the what we can say, the particular directory, in order to make the JSP file is like inside the main folder, we have to create a folder that is a web app, and inside this web app we have to create web inv and then views, and inside this views we have to create the JSP pages. Why? Because that is a predefined path that is set by a Spring Boot application. So whenever there is a any call, okay, to fetch the JSP pages, so by default Spring Boot application will what we can say, process this path in order to find the particular JSP files. Okay, so this is what the JSP file looks like. So as we know that in order to mark the file as JSP, we have to include this header tag in our JSP folder. Then it is going to be a simple HTML file as well. Okay, now here you can see we have included the particular expression language. Now let's see what is happening. So see, first, as we can see, like we have created a controller method, right, which is known as hello controller, and inside this we are giving the URL for get mapping, that is /hello, and which is directing us to the handler method, that is nothing but the type hello. Okay, inside this we are passing the model attribute, right? So now what this model is doing, now this model will help us to set value in our JSP web page. Okay, for this expression language we have to set some value, right? So with this help of model we can set the value for that attribute. So what is the syntax for doing is, what we are going to do is model dot add attribute. Okay, this is the method to set any values for a specific expression in a JSP file, not in just JSP but also in um timely, which we will see further. Okay, so we are going to use that model dot add attribute. Now for the specific message, okay, we are passing this attribute here. Okay, so this expression name and this value both has to be same, then only this data will get bind here. Okay, and for this message we are passing what, hello Spring Boot, suppose, simple. Okay, so once, and after that what we are doing is returning the hello page. Okay, so when the call will go to this hello page, what will happen, this file will get open, and inside this file this message will get set with the value that is hello Spring Boot. Okay, so this is how particularly the value is getting passed from view to controller with with the help of the model. Okay, so this is the basic execution of what we can say a JSP file. So like this is what I have written here as well, that the hello method in the controller has an attribute that is named as message. Okay, so what it will do, so this will be bind with that of the message attribute that is present in the JSP file. Okay, and then we are setting the value there. Okay, so once the user click, so for in order to open the particular web page on the server, right, web browser, we have to pass this URL. This port number is predefined by our Spring Boot application as well. Okay, once we give hit on this URL, so it will get directed to this get mapping method, which will call this handler method. This handler method will then add the attribute for the message in the hello JSP page. Okay, and this is how the execution will take place. Okay, now let's see the coding implementation in detail to understand what actually is a JSP. So now let's see the implementation of a simple form application in our Spring Boot, okay, using the JSP views. Okay, so for that first we will create a JSP file named as suppose form.jsp. So how do we create it? So for that we have to go in this src, then in main, and then right click over here. Then we have to create a new folder. Okay, and name it as, we have to name it as web app. Okay, please note the process that I'm doing here, it has to be same. Then only a Spring application can detect this JSP files. Okay, then click on finish. Okay, and after this, what we will do is inside this web app, we will create again a new folder which is named as views. Okay, and then finish. Okay, and then for this we are going to add the prefix and suffix. So why it is needed? Because it basically tells like start searching for the so this basically tells this prefix and suffix that starts searching for the related JSP files. Okay, in the prefix, that is the weaves folder, and whatever the suffix, that is dot JSP, is nothing it but by the JSP file. Okay, so for that in the application dot properties, what we have to write is we have to first note the suffix. So that the command for that is Spring MVC dot view. Okay, and then first we will add this prefix. Okay, so prefix is nothing but views. Okay, so start searching for the file in first in views folder, and then end the search as dot JSP, that is nothing but my suffix. So MVC dot view dot suffix, which is nothing but dot JSP. Just speed. Okay, so this configuration has this to be done first. Okay, because this is the only way that a Spring application actually can find that where the JSP files are located. Now let's give the implementation for the same, right? So for that, inside this, let's create a new file named as suppose form.jsp and click on enter. This, okay, we will first paste the URL as suppose. Okay, and so here we will first give this URL. So what is this URL is saying that this basically tells that yes, this is a JSP container, and whatever the configurations are needed for the same, please take it from the given container. Okay, so this basically gives the indication that whatever the file we are creating will actually be a JSP file. Okay, then we have to include is what doc type HTML. Okay, HTML. Okay, then what I have is head, and then the title of my page is suppose let's name it as a simple form. Okay, simple form, right? And then now let's create the body for a form. So let's give it as body. Okay, and let's name it as heading as suppose simple form application, right? And so this is nothing but same way as we work with out of the HTML. Okay, and then we will give here as form annotation as we create the form. Okay, so first we are going to create a input field for suppose first name. Okay, so that is nothing but label for we will name it as first first name. Okay, and then let's define this name as suppose first. Okay, next suppose we are giving input type for this, sorry, input type, suppose I'm giving it as text. Okay, let's give the ID for this as same first name. Okay, then let's name this field as nothing but a, give the name for this as the first name. Okay, then break tag, I'm not applying any CSS for this because let me just simply execute and show this. Okay, next copy the same thing for last name as well. Let's change it to last name, suppose last name, and here also last name. Okay, then next we will have a radio button for selecting the gender. Okay, suppose label, then we will name it as suppose gender, and let's change here it as last. Okay, and then here first we will give the suppose input type as radio because we are creating a radio button. Then let's set the ID for this as male. Okay, and name as nothing but gender. Okay, and value will be what here, first male, right? Now let's give label for this, that is label for nothing but it will be for male. Okay, that is nothing but male, right? And then Here we will write as name. Similarly, we will create one more radio button for another gender and gender, that is female. Okay, so let's name here it as name will be gender, value will be again female. Okay, label for this is female. Okay, and let's change here to female. Okay, and last is our input button. No, sorry, submit button. Right. So input type is going to be our submit. Right, and the value will be nothing but submit. Submit. Okay, and let's close this form. Okay, so this is how we are going to create a very simple form. Inside this we have first included our JSP container by giving this tag and then a simple form which we have generated. Okay, now for this let's create a controller class. Okay, so for that here we will go, and here in the Java, that is in this package. Okay, let's create first suppose a new package for controller. So let's name it as controller. Enter. Okay, and inside this package we will create a new controller class. So let's name it as suppose form controller. Okay, form controller. Okay, now let's hit it enter. Okay, so to make this class controller, as we know, first we have to keep the annotation as controller. It can be rest controller or simple controller also, because both do the same form. Okay, then first we will create a get mapping method for the same. So for that, give the annotation that is get mapping, then the URL for this is nothing but suppose show form. Okay, show form. Then let's give the method implementation. So that is a public spy home, right? Suppose, and let's first import this. Yeah, and then it will return us what? It will return us something but my form JSP page. So let's name it as form. Okay, let's do control S. Now let's see whether by doing this our form is getting open or not. Okay, so for that we will run the application. So now run our application, right? So for that, so our application has started running, and it says what? That the server port has started at 9090. Now so for that, so why this is happening? Because there is, so as you can see, whenever we are hitting on the URL, that is show form. Okay, so the particular file is getting downloaded. Okay, let me show this. So as you can see, okay, so why this is happening? Because there is no embedded Jasper servlet for this. Okay, so for that, first we will add the particular Jasper servlet. Understand first that why we need this Tomcat embedded Jasper. Okay, so as we are making the use of JSP, and for JSP, that is for rendering the views, the Tomcat embedded Jasper dependency is needed. Okay, so basically this, as this JSP files, okay, they are not executed directly by the server. Okay, so for that particular configurations or compiling has to be done. Okay, and that is easily done by this Tomcat embedded server Jasper dependency. Okay, so Spring Boot uses, like if it has to work or it has to run this JSP file. So in this Spring Boot, we have to include this dependency. Okay, so for that, what we will do is we will select any version from here. Suppose I am taking it as 10.1.1, and then here we have to copy this dependency and then paste it in our application. Okay, so we will paste it in our application in the pom.xml file. So this is our pom.xml file. Let's paste it here. Okay, now let's again run our application and see. Now you can see the Tomcat server has started at 9090. Now let's go and again hit the URL. Okay, so that was nothing but local host, right? Our port number is 9090, then slash, and then show, that was form. Now let's hit it. Okay, now see, the simple form that we have created is getting open, as there is no CSS, right? So it is looking very, very simple. You can add the bootstrap CSS and it make it very little attractive. Okay, now what we are going to do is, let's suppose we are entering some values as suppose Shivam, and name as suppose anything. Okay, so now what I want is, now when I click on submit, okay, it should give me the details that I have entered, like first name is this, last name is this, and gender this, etc. Okay, so for that we will create suppose a very post mapping method, a very simple post mapping method. Okay, so how we will create it is, we will go back again to our controller class. Okay, let's close this, the form that controller, and let's create a post mapping method. So what we will do is post, okay, mapping, right? And let's give the URL as suppose submit form. Okay, submit form. Okay, and then what we will do is we will create a method that is public staff type string and submit form. Okay, and then here we are going to pass some parameters. So as we know, we have this request parameter annotation whose main is to what, like here, as we have different values, okay, like which I'll pass here. So these are nothing but the parameters that are present in my request. Okay, so I want to fetch these parameters and I'm to pass it to my method, that is in this method, that is the submit form method. So that is why I'll use this request parameter annotation, which we have seen in the Spring Boot uh, tutorial, that why we use different parameters, right? So with the help of this, what we will do first, we will call this first name. Okay, right? Then next, so let's first import this parameters. Okay, so for that, first we will need, and then we have is request param. Okay, let's import it. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And the second parameter which we will ask for is suppose the last name, right? So request param. Okay, the string should be last name. Okay, this name and the one which we have mentioned here, okay, it has to be same, then only the values will be mapped with each other. Okay, then next parameter which we will request is the request, sorry, request param is our string gender, suppose, right? And last is a model. So what this model do is nothing but it help us to set the parameters, right? Which we will have in the JSP file. To see first, let's import it. Yeah. Now let's give the method implementation. So in this method, we are going to pass all these different parameters. Okay. Okay. So first, what we will do is we will create a string message. Okay. Message. Okay. Which will be nothing but a form submitted. Okay. Which will display that form is submitted. And here we will pass then different values. That first, the first name. Okay. Suppose first name. Let's make it capital little. Okay. Then nothing but my first, that is first name. Okay, then we will have second is the last name. Okay, so for that, let's do it as last, sorry, name. Okay, then we will have it as last name. Okay, then let's do it as, let's now add gender. So gender plus, here we will pass the gender value, then done. Okay, so it's changed to last name. Okay, so I guess the last name here is different, so it has to be like this, last name. So it will change to last name. Okay, and then we will set the model attribute, that is model, yeah, dot add attribute for message as the whole message that I'm setting here. Okay, and give me this on my, return this me on my result.jsp page. Okay, so now let's first create this page, then I'll explain you the process of what is happening here. So for that, inside the views we will create a new file as result.jsp dot JSP. Enter. Okay, here again we will give first the heading to tell it that it's a JSP container file, and then the we are going to create this HTML file, the doc type HTML, then HTML. Okay, then let's give head, sorry, head for our file as suppose. In title we will write is that form submitted result, we can say. Okay, and then let's create the body. In body, we will first add h2 as suppose form submitted information. Okay, and let's close the tag and then we will create a paragraph. We will pass the message value, that is message. Okay, Let's see actually what is happening here. So first, okay, in this JSP file, okay, what we have is this tag. Okay, so in this JSP file, what in this JSP view file, we have this tag that is of message. Okay, so what is the use of this? So it is helping us to display the value of the message attribute that we have passed in the controller. So in the controller, as you can see, for message attribute, we are passing this value, that is form submitted. Then in first name, we will have the first name that will be entered by the user in the form. Then last name and gender. So that whole value will be passed here in this message. Okay, here in this tag, and this message which is given this inverted commas is nothing but my representation of this message. Okay, so so this message is what, so in this way which we have given with a dollar tag. Okay, so this is the basic annotation which we use. Suppose we have to map any value of the controller, like as we have given here, and this I have to display it on my web page. So for that, the syntax in the JSP is like this. Okay, so this is nothing, it represents a placeholder for a dynamic value, so that is provided by the controller and it is passed to the view. Okay, so with this annotation we can simplify it. So let's, and if I talk about the methods, what is happening here first, with the help of get mapping, as we have seen, the form will get open. Then what will happen, whatever the values are entered by the user, okay, in the first name field, last name field, or the gender, with the help of request param, they will get they will come to this field setting. First name will come here, last name and gender, and then we have model attribute to order to set the parameters and fetch the parameters. Okay, in the string message, I have passed a message like, once the form gets submitted, this message will be printed. That, and for the value for that in the JSP, we are setting it using this model.add attribute. Okay, now let's run our application and see whether we are able to do it or not. Okay, now let's run it and check it. So as we can see, our server has started again at 9090 running. And before running, there is one more thing to note, that now what we want is like when the user submits the form, okay, by clicking the submit button, what we want is to collect all the data from the form field, okay, and send it to this HTTP request that is nothing but the submit form, so that the value will be displayed here. Okay, so for this, what we will use is the nothing but the form action. So this is our form.jsp page, right? So here in the form, okay, we will generate, or we will add one annotation that is nothing but a form action. Okay, as form action, we will set the value which we have given the URL, that is a submit form, in that post here. Like this URL, we are going to pass it in a form action method. Okay, and the method will be what, post, right? It is nothing but post. Okay, so with the help of this action attribute in the form element, we basically provide the URL of the server side endpoint. Okay, so let's understand the simple execution of what is happening here. First, the user will hit this URL, then the form will get opened. Then whatever the values are there, the user will fill the particular values. Then it will automatically get redirect to this post mapping URL, from where it will fetch the different values of the fields like first name, last name, and gender. Then that value will be set here in the message, and that we are setting it in our JSP view, where we have this message with that, with this message. Okay, now let's run and see whether this is working fine or not. Okay, so see, our application has started running at Tomcat 9090. So let's go there and check it. So localhost 9090. First, we have to open the form, right? So we will do first show form. So just add simple CSS for this to look it more attractive. Okay, let's add first name as suppose James, last name as suppose this. Okay, let's set it to suppose male, and then click on submit. Okay, so you can see after doing post mapping, we are getting this message as form is submitted with the first name, last name, and gender. Okay, so this is a very simple execution about how we can create a form using JSP views. Okay, and now let's see one more example. Like suppose I have to add a validation, right, to my form. Like suppose in my form I am having two fields like username and password, and what we want is like user has to enter both the fields while filling the form. Okay, so now let's see the example for this. So for that, first we will create a simple Java class. Okay, and name it as model class, that is nothing but a suppose user. Okay, then enter, and inside this class, okay, let's name create two field, that is so first one is suppose username. Okay, private string user name, username. Okay, and next one is nothing but our password. Okay, private string as suppose password. Okay, Yeah, and now what we want is like while whenever user fills this form, right? We want this to be not blank, right? So for that we will use a notation which is not blank. That this has to be filled compulsory. One thing is necessary to note that to import this note blank, okay, in our form.xml file, okay, we need this starter validation dependency, okay. Then only this particular library will be imported. Sorry, annotation will be imported, okay. Now next is what here we are going to give the message, suppose as message, okay. Let's say that username is a required, okay. And next same we will also pass for password as well, okay, for password, and here we will write it as password is required, okay. Control S, and for the same we will now create what getters and setters, okay. So generate getters and setters, select all, and generate, as well as our default constructor, that is for superclass and generate, okay. Now next let's change the execution of a controller class, okay. So as we were doing from that was a form controller, that only I'm editing it, so I'm not changing the name. What we will just do is change this URLs here. So first we will name it as suppose register, okay. Then we will have same home page, and here we will pass is what, suppose model, okay. And then here we are going to redirect it to the form page only, and inside that we will change the execution, okay. So in this form page which we are having here, okay, first we what we will do is we will give this URL as register, okay, and method will be post, and here then label this is for what, user name, okay. Then this will be changed to what, user name, okay. Then input type will be text, ID will change to again, that is username, okay. This will also change to username, and here we are going to add one field, okay, that is nothing but value, which is of type user. Okay, now I'll tell you like why we are including this, and this will be required, that is required, okay. Similarly we will create for password as well, so let's create it. So control C, let's remove this all, yeah, and control V, let's name this as password, okay. Then this will change to what, password, okay. It will be type nothing but password. ID will be password, okay. Name will be password, and here it will be user dot password, okay. And here like we will add a span, okay, that will be of color, suppose red. So color, let's add a color to it, that is going to be suppose red, okay. And let's close this, and inside this we will have add one parameter. I'll tell you one by one that what we are exactly doing here, okay. So errors dot get suppose fill error, okay. Then it will be what, user name, okay. And dot it would be default message, okay. Similarly we will also add it for a password. Let's name it as suppose password, okay. Let's save it, and here in register like the result page, change it to registration successful, not include this part, or the form has been submitted successfully, okay. This is a simple execution. Now let's come to our controller, okay, and understand what we are doing. So in our controller, like first name complete this method, that is we will first add the attribute, that is model dot add suppose attribute, and we will name it as nothing but user. For user we are going to set the value as new user, that is nothing but the object, So now see the execution of this method. So at first, at this URL, the form will get open where with the help of which the user can set the username and password. Okay. So this model.attribute method, this line is basically used for rendering a form page. Okay. So you want what we want to write, we want to pre-populate the form with empty or default user object. So what can happen is that user can fill in the required information, right? So here what we are doing is nothing but we are want to pass different validations, right? It should be that the username should not be blank and the password should be is required, and also all this validation we have to pass. That is why we are passing this user object here, okay, which is getting bind with that of the user which is present in our JSP. Okay, so when the form is submitted, the framework will attempt to bind the form data to the user object. So what will happen, that that is this value will get bind with that of this value when the form is getting submitted. Okay, and it will check if there are any errors or validation errors for user.username or user.password. Okay, and if there are any errors, then whatever it is, it will be what we can say, it will be given us with the help of this spam tag. Okay, so which is doing what the, as we know that the spam element is a is used to add the color. So the error will be of red color, we will say element tag. Okay, then this particularly is a expression, okay, which we use in MVC, particularly both in JSP as well as TimeLib, okay, to indicate what type of error is. So so this error is nothing but a type of, is typically the object, okay, that holds different validation error, right? So as we are using at the rate not blank and at the rate valid in our form, okay, so that validations will be checked by this particular error object. Then any validation error, if there will, it will occur. Okay, so it will be stored in the binding result object, which we will now create further in a post mapping method. Okay, so this get filled error, that is nothing but the username. Okay, so this retrieves the validation error that is associated with our username field. Okay, so if there is any validation error for the username field, then this expression will return a filled error object. Whatever it is, that object it will return, otherwise it will return us null. Okay, so and next what we have is a default message. So that retrieves the default error message that is associated with that particular constant. So for example, for username, we have set it the default message, as we can see in the user, as username is not required. So that will be is required, right? So that error will be returned. Okay, so that's why we are using this expression and evaluate the errors, and whatever the error is, we are going to get, or we are going to return it to us in the span which we are using. Now, next is, let's create one post mapping method in our register. So for that, what we will do, we will change the value as here as suppose resist to pass the different parameters. So first we will have valid, okay, to check the errors, right? Valid method. So of user, where we will pass the user object, okay, and then we will have binding result. Binding result, I suppose, binding result. Let's name it as suppose register form. Okay, let's change it to binding half. And inside this, what we will do first is that will remain same. We are going to return to the remain result page. And if this says that if binding result, that is this one, that is binding result dot, if it has any errors, okay, then return us back, that is return to form page. Okay, now see the execution of this method. Okay, we have this valid annotation which is used to indicate that the user object, whether it is of valid or not, whether the username as per it is said that it is required or whatever the parameters we can set. I have just set here one parameter that it should be not blank. So it will check for this validation. You can also set like this should be of this much length, etc. Whatever it is. Okay, so it will first check valid, like whatever the restrictions we have set, that is not blank, okay, constant, it is satisfied or not for the user object. Okay, then we have second parameter is this binding result. So this is an particularly this binding result is nothing but an object, okay, that holds the result of the validation and binding process. Okay, so it particularly tells whether this process is valid or not. Okay, to here, like here in this errors for this field. Okay, and then whatever the what we can say user information is, it contains, okay, it is stored in this binding result. Okay, so if it says that if this binding result has any error, then return us to this form page again. Okay, and if there is no error, so it will return us to the result page. So I have just did here one change, that I am also adding the attribute user, like what I have did in like in my result page, like I want whatever the value the user has saved to be passed here with that of the username and password, right? So for that I have included this model attribute, okay, in my post mapping method. And similarly, as we also want, right, whatever the not blank validation we have applied, right, to our user to be passed here. So for that also, in a form.jsp with the form action tag, we have to include this model attribute equal to user. This field we have to include, then only that value for the will get passed here. Okay, now let's run our application and see what is happening. So let's run it. Okay, so you can see that the Tomcat server has started at 9090. Let's go at, and here we will hit our first URL, that is register. Okay, to open the form. Yes, then the simple form has opened. Let's suppose you give username as Rocky and suppose password as something any random, then submit it. Okay, so we can see this result page is getting opened with whatever values we have saved. Okay, now suppose if we go back, okay, do once refresh, okay, and if I'm not entering any values, okay, and if I'm clicking on submit, so we are getting this error, right? Please fill out this field, or please fill out this field, or suppose if I'm just entering password then clicking on submit, then also we are getting this. Okay, so that is happening because of the validation which we have given in our Spring Boot to the user page. Okay, so I hope you have got different validation concept and how to create a simple form concept in JSP with the help of Spring Boot. Thank you.